Well, I'm Mrs Maddocks and I originated from Atherstone and my name was Sylvia Johnstone. And we lived in Atherstone Yards, Long Street.
My name is Mrs Pickering and I originate from Allens Row in Long Street, and my name was Kathleen Lucas.
We lived in the first house in Atherstone Yards, and you went into the house from the entry, into a hall, and then we went up the stairs. We'd only got one living room. The sink, the fire and everything was in there. We used to have a tin bath in front of the fire. Mum used to hot the water on the fire. When there was air raids, we used to go down the cellar. And Wrights from next door, they came down to the cellar. And anybody else in the yard that wanted to come down could. Upstairs we'd got 2 bedrooms, and then we'd got an attic with 2 massive rooms where, if it was wet, the kids used to play. Next door to us was Mr and Mrs Wright with their 2 children, Peter and Mary. Then farther up the yard was the wash house and the coal place and the toilet. Next to that was Bickley's.
No, Mrs
Barlow's.
Yeah.
And then Bickley's.
Then us, Lucas.
Then Lucas. Then there was another wash place, weren't there?
No, then there was Mr Field. Mr and Mrs Field, they came from London. They were refugees, and the council found them this house. And they lived there. And Mrs Fields came. Do you remember Peter? Stan? Oh no, they'd be gone. You'd moved by then when they came. Yeah. But they moved in. They were refugees. They lived there. Then next to them there was the wash house. Then there was the toilets backing onto the wash house. And on the toilets the other side, which the dustbin place backed onto.
Yeah.
Then there was and then there was across from the wash house, there used to be a tap where everybody could go and get some water.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be the tap. And then there was a wall, a big wall by Holland's garden, which had line props on where everybody had to climb onto the wall to hang the washing if they wanted to blow the sheets.
Yeah.
And then from the dustbins there was Mrs Hughes, Mrs Haddon, Mrs Orrell, Mrs Smith, Mrs Gilbert. Then there was Fred Gilbert and Violet. Then there was Mrs
Finch.
Mrs Finch. Then there was Fred and Charlie Gilbert. They lived at the top house.
Yeah.
Their house had got the entry on it, and that led across onto the main road, and then across the road from there was the sweet shop.
Eden's.
Yes.
So were all the houses in the yard the same, or were they all slightly...
Yes.
All the same.
Yeah, except Mary Wright's, and then next door to you, theirs was a bit bigger than ours, because they'd got their own wash house and a place where to pour all the coal and play and hang the washing, hadn't they?
And you got through to that from their house.
Yeah.
Whereas everybody else had to come out the house and walk to the wash house.
And then they got an attic, because that's where you and Mary left me when I was little. I can remember in them big eye prams, and you left me, put me in the pram, we were playing, and the next minute you and Mary had gone. You'd gone to have your tea, and I don't know how long I was there, but I waited ever so patient. And Mrs Wright come up with you and Mary and got me out of the pram.
You mean? So how many had attics?
Only the 2 at
Yours,
the bottom.
Yeah.
Ours and Wright's. And then our front room that should have been was turned into a little Fred Hogg's shop. He repaired electricals and radios, and then he was the first one in Atherstone that did televisions, weren't he?
And I remember our house, it was front door, it was number 3 Allen's Row we lived in, and we walked through into just a big room, and then on one side of the room was the fireplace, 2 little alcoves each side, the fireplace, and then where you walked in by the front door there was the front window, which was little tiny windows, and then on your left hand side as you went in the house there was the pantry where you stepped down a step, went in there was shelves and a little sink to do your washing up. Then next to there was the stairs door where you went up the stairs onto a little landing where my mum and dad slept, and they'd got the dressing table and their bed. Then in our room we'd got a 3/4 bed and a wardrobe, and there was a little fireplace because she used to like that when we were poorly. And then you'd got the little gas mantle, just no electric.
No, it was all
we didn't
gas
have any
mantle.
electric at all, and she just had a little gas mantle to light the room, and we more or less had candles to go to bed with.
Yeah.
So how many children all told?
There was me, I was the eldest. Then there was Janet. She was 3.5 years younger than me, and then there was our Jean. I was 9 years older than Jean. But then when my mum had our Jean, about 3 months after, she had to go away because she was poorly, and so our Jean went to live with my auntie in Inkley till she was 3.5, and me and our Janet then had to come and live with my grandma in Twycross, went to Cungerston School, and then my dad had to live on his own and go to work and pay for my grandma a bit of money each week and a bit of money each week to my auntie Mary to keep her Jean, so he had a real rough life.
So
really.
what did your dad do?
He was a miner down Baxley Pit.
Most of them up that yard was miners, weren't they?
Yeah, yeah.
My dad was the gas man. Mr. Wright next door worked on the council. And then it started with miners, didn't it?
Yeah, more or less all miners then going up the road, or up the yard. But Mr. Smith, when I was a little girl, every morning I used to go up to Mr. and Mrs. Smith. They lived about halfway up the yard, and they used to give me a bluebird toffee. I used to go up for my bluebird toffee and then go to school. Then if my mum was visiting my mum at Twycross, Mrs. Smith used to fetch me home and give me some soup. Then I used to go back to school. Then Mr. Smith used to take me to see his daughter Nellie sometimes, took me down the street for little walks, took me down to the park at the bottom of the town where they used to have the circus.
Oh, yeah.
Dugdale's Park,
Yeah.
that used to be opened. And he took me there one day, and there was this elephant and it got my hair. And I squealed, and the elephant let me go, but I never forgot it when the elephant got my hair. I was only about 3. And I can remember up till I was 3. I can remember when my mum was pregnant with our Janet, and I'd only be about 3. And I can remember she was going to have Janet, and then she had our Janet, and I had to go to my auntie's at Twycross to stay with her so she could look after our Janet, because I was born in an Eton hospital. Our Janet was born in Allen's Row. Our Jean was born in Allen's Row. My sister Sue, the youngest one, she was born in Priory Walk at Manchester.
Was it just left to the local women to look after the women in labour? Were there any midwives? Or?
Sue Warbank was the midwife, because my mum named Sue after her, because she come to deliver Sue, and she didn't know what to name Sue, so she asked Sue what her name was, and she says, right, that's going to be her name, so she named her after Sue.
Sue Warbank delivered me, and she also delivered my first baby.
Good grief.
That's how good a midwife she was.
Yeah, I can remember her.
Everybody cried when she retired. Yeah. She was perfect.
So your house in the yard was bigger than a lot of the others?
As I say, we'd got the attic rooms as well. We didn't use them, only for playing in. But downstairs we should have had the front room as well, which, as I say, was Fred Hogg's electrical shop.
So what did you do? Rent it out to him?
Well, we were paying rent for the house, so whoever
owned
it was obviously having rent off Fred Hogg.
I think there were council. Oh, yeah, was the council houses?
There must have been.
Or was they owned by, I don't know whether they owned by Mr. Bloor.
Well,
there was a Mr. Bloor in Atherstone, and I think he owned those houses.
He was a landlord, weren't
he? Yeah, I think he owned them. And then I can remember Fox's butcher's shop.
That's farther down the road on the opposite side.
Was there only one way in and out of your yard?
No, we could go straight through from Long Street to, what was that street at the back called?
Oh God, back. It weren't that way, was it? It's where the miners' welfare was, wasn't it? I can remember I'd only be about 4. My mum was washing and she got the copper on. They used to have 2 coppers and she got the copper on. And she used to have a big ringer, big wooden roll ringers. And I was playing and I was in the way. So she sent me out to come play up the yard. Well, I went up to see Violet Gilbert, because it's Fred and Charlie Gilbert, Violet and Charlie. And I went in and she gave me a cake. Oh, I was so pleased with this cake. So I ran down to tell my mum. I said, look what Violet's given me. She gave me a cake. Well, she snatched it off me and she chucked it in the copper, in the fireplace. You're not eating that, she says. And she wouldn't let me have it. So I was so disappointed. I thought, right, I'm going to tell Violet. So I runs out the wash house, runs up to Violet's to tell her, but my mum was after me. I could feel her behind me, coming after me. So I thought, well, even though I was small, I thought, well, if I turn this way, she's going to get me as a turn. So I'll carry straight on. So I carried straight on, through the yard, through the entry, onto the road. A big lorry coming. My mum just got me elbow, pulled me back, and she walloped me all the way down the yard.
Back home.
Yeah, she walloped me all the way. She got a piece of line. She tied it round my waist and tied me to the table leg, which was one of those white top tables, She tied me to it, left the door open and cleared off back to do her washing. When she come back, I was knocked out. I'd been swinging on the door and I'd slipped somehow and knocked my head and knocked myself out on the door. So then she had to go next door to get Mrs Pickering to come round to look after me. I can remember that as if it was yesterday.
and she goes on at me for leaving her in the pram.
Doesn't need help, does she?
No! You sure you didn't get in that pram yourself?
No.
Did you have to take it in turns using the wash?
Yeah,
yes.
Everybody had got the day,
a certain day. Did you share your wash day with Mrs Wright?
Yeah.
Yes, I thought you did. Yeah. And then from
we
Mrs
had the coppers with the fire underneath.
Yeah, from Barlow's on through the yard, they had certain times of the day to wash, didn't they? Mm.
And the toilets, what happened with those? How did they work?
All shared.
Shared. I remember the newspaper on a nail. Having to go out up the toilet before you went to bed. And then if you wanted to go in the night, then it was the potty.
Yeah.
Were they flushing or were they collected?
No, they were flush. They were flushing.
About the first...
ours were flush.
About the first flush toilets. Yeah.
I think ours were flush, but I think the other side, I don't know whether they...
No, I don't think they were. I think they were buckets.
Yeah, I
with
think
a
there were
board
buckets
across
on the other side of the toilet, on the other side, but I think ours, the one we used, was a flush. I don't know whether the others were flushes because I never really can't remember ever going in.
Pull the chain. Yeah.
Yeah.